Здравейте на всички! Надявам се, че се чуваме. Днес имам удоволствието да ви представя Тамара Дерич, която ще представи четвъртия модул от нашето обучение Създаване на регистри и архиви на нематериалното културно наследство на местно ниво. Казвам ви няколко думи за Тамара. Тя е фасилитатор от мрежата на ЮНЕСКО, също така и куратор в Етнографския музей на Истрия. Има дългогодишен опит в управлението на проекти с финансиране от Европейския съюз и други. Също така мисля, че над 10 години се занимава и с организацията на етнофилм. Това е фестивал за етнографски филми в Хърватия, който отново има насоченост към нематериалното културно наследство. Така че, Тамара, оставям те.
Hello, dear colleagues. It's such a pleasure to be here and to be part of this wonderful community of experts, not only from your side, but also my colleagues who presented previously and who will still present in the days to come. First of all, thanks to the Regional Center in Sofia for organizing and actually feeling and having this sensitivity towards the topics that are needed to be discussed among experts to adequately implement the 2003 convention. So thank you for last year's webinars on the focusing more on museums, but also this year's topics on inventorying, which is documenting and inventorying, which are, let's say, the first steps in implementing the convention and working with safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. I would like to ask, before we start, for your understanding for me today. It is a very difficult moment in Serbia because yesterday we witnessed the killing of 8 children in a local school. So I wanted to take this opportunity just to emphasize the importance of education and intangible cultural heritage, because 2 days ago, I actually had an interview with the Regional Center, and I was discussing and reflecting upon education and intangible cultural heritage. And actually, in this short interview, I recall all the experiences I had since 2018 in working with schools on European level, and the feedback that all the teachers and the students gave to these programs where intangible cultural heritage was integrated into schools, because it gave them context and it raised their sense of belonging, of identity, and feeling of pride. And in this very short interview, I stated that I really believe in emotional intelligence, because also these kids said that they were infused with emotions because they worked with their grandparents in these projects that we were conducting. So let's hope that intangible cultural heritage can also help our educational systems to be better each day. I'm really sorry for this very short moment I needed to take. Hopefully you can understand me, and we can now begin with our presentation. It relates, just a second to share the screen. Please, if someone can just say if you can see the screen, if you can see my presentation.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the creation of inventories and archives of intangible cultural heritage at local level. Of course, the focus of this presentation will be on the local level and the building of inventories that you can all participate in, and the small changes that you can do in your own communities. But in order to come to this final, let's say, part of the presentation, we will of course go through some steps and through some general aspects of inventories and development of inventories as presented and supported by the 2003 convention. You will see in some cases that I will repeat maybe some things that were already said, mostly by my colleague Panayota, who talked about inventorying and documenting. So these processes are actually impossible to separate in some ways. Of course, as she said, not every inventorying process ends up with an inventory. And today we will be focusing on building and creating inventories and all the diversity of this kind of aiding materials, I would say, and aiding tools in safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. So we will have three parts of the presentation today. The first part, it deals with the introduction, the key concepts, understanding a bit all the differences and all the suggestions and the requirements that the convention puts in front of us. The second part relates to practical examples, where I will show you some examples of some inventories, if I may call it like that, and we will discuss it later on from my own perspective, from the Ethnographic Museum of Istria, from the Eco-Museum Batana, a good safeguarding practice where I also work as a consultant. Then some example from Italy, from Bosnia, and of course we will also talk about the national system in Bulgaria, but in a very short part, because you will have a rough presentation by your colleague. The third part is, I hope we will have the time and we will have your interest in working together on one exercise in building an inventory together. I will explain later on how we can do it together, just to reflect upon some basic principles and just open our minds toward different possibilities, different opportunities, different methods, and different formats of inventories. The aim of this webinar is to present the requirements of a community-based inventory framework, which reflects the spirit of the convention. Many of us, I know that there are also ethnologists listening to this webinar. I'm also an ethnologist, a cultural anthropologist, and actually, you know, all the field work and our methods that we were employing for, I would say, a century now, have had this gradual development. And we always feel that we have been pretty much close to the field, pretty much close to the communities. Nevertheless, many of this information that we collected were not presented to the communities, or were not gathered in a way that would be in the spirit of the convention. And what does it mean? We will slowly show it through this webinar. So just to set the stage and being aware of how we use the different terms, it is really important, because you know that on many national levels we use the term register. For example, in Croatia we say registar nematerijalne kulturne baštine. In your own country, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it is also the national register. But for the sake of understanding each other on an international level in working with the convention, I just wanted to list these key concepts and later on also explain the difference between the inventory, the register, the list, and so on. So inventorying is the process of identifying, gathering, and listing ICH with the view to safeguard. And this notion is the most important. What is the purpose of inventorying? We will come to that later. Documenting, a step within the process of inventorying, which relates to the process of recording information about an element. Archiving, again, a step within the process of inventorying, which relates to the storing of the recorded materials. Of course, today we have archives that have different activities, and some of them also can be regarded as part of inventorying and coming closer to the communities. Metadata, which is different from what we call the content and the descriptive part of the inventory. The metadata actually is information about the information. So the information about the content that is collected on a source to help cite the source and to later create a finding aid. So actually information about what is recorded on that media. It can be a list, some notes, field notes from the 60s, or multimedia, or a film filmed 2 years ago. What are the functions and purposes? And why is this important? Actually, in driving the end result, in all of these different stages, we will see that our function, that the function of our inventory or our activity will drive the end result. How will this inventory, how will the documentation process look like? It depends on the function and the purpose that we want to achieve. So the inventories are mostly, and this is the first function of the inventory, is to identify intangible cultural heritage, raise awareness about intangible cultural heritage, and set ground for future safeguarding measures. To these core functions that are many times reflected within the convention, to identify and raise awareness and list, all the elements in one country, I would add some more differences or some more functions. So the difference is also between the national, regional, or local inventories, the scope, the geographical scope of one inventory, and the difference between the scope in terms of the purpose. To nominate elements on the UNESCO list, we need to follow specific rules. To give context to museum collections, it will be a totally different approach, maybe not entirely similar or to the nomination list or the requirements of the inventories for the nomination list, but also inventories can serve to conduct educational programs, to provide teaching materials through the form of an inventory, to support environmental initiatives, and to support local communities in development projects. I'm sorry, I missed this wording. Why am I saying this? Am I listing all these different scopes? Because later on in the examples, you will see how these different scopes have different results, of course, different inventories, and how even very small initiatives that you can do on local level can really make a huge impact on local communities that are really relevant to them, not only in the terms of safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, but also having some other very concrete purposes, such as education or tourism development or environmental activities. When we talk about documentation, I already started the subject about fieldwork, the ethnographic fieldwork, let's say. Documentation per se is a safeguarding measure, but it is also a supporting activity in transmission, education, awareness raising, and research, but many others as well. When we say documentation, we mean, okay, I will go on the field, I will research a specific element, and I will shoot a film about it, or I will do a short video, or I will take a few pictures in order to get more content and more context for the information I will bring to the inventory. But how long will this film last? What are the possibilities of my inventorying system? What is my final goal? What do I want to do with this documentation? And I will give you a very short example, a very concrete example. If we want to document a craft, in order to transmit this craft for future generation, we really need to make a film that lasts for hours, that shows each and every single moment and process of this process. Sorry. If we want to document for the purpose of listing, usually it will be 10 minutes film. I know that in your national requirements, but also in the UNESCO requirements, the films are maximum 10 minutes. If we want to document for educational purposes, our kids at school won't watch a film for 4 or 5 hours, but they could concentrate on 20 to 30 minutes showing a process and interviewing the bearer and raising awareness through education about local intangible cultural heritage. All of these processes will be done firstly through documentation. Again, as I said, the different goals will guide the way of taking records and edit the final documentation. This is especially important with filmmaking, as I said, but also we know that fieldwork diaries were different depending on whether we are just taking some short notes for an inventory that has the cards. You know, we all worked in the past with this kind of cards, or we really needed a rough fieldwork diary that will help our research and our academic work. To archive preserving information for future use. We already said that, and this is just a reminder. Very shortly, I would like to draw your attention to if you're interested in documenting, participatory documentation of crafts, a fantastic approach of Almevik Gunnar and his work From Archive to Living Heritage. You can find it online. All of these pictures in the next 3 slides come from his own work, and it was done within the Swedish craftsmanship lab, if I'm not mistaken. And actually, why it was important for me to show these 3 slides, because the development of documentation depended greatly on technological progress. The field texts, drawings, and photographs were soon replaced by moving images, directly influencing the changes of the paradigms of qualitative field research and visual theories. This doesn't mean that we already know everything. There are still many challenges on how to use documentation, audiovisual documentation, to ethically document and include our own subjects or the bearers, and not to include our own authoritative voices as scientists or heritage experts. So this is still a challenge, but I think that with the development of technologies and the moving of the paradigms, we are closer to what we could call the almost perfect way of documenting living heritage. So in this first slide, we see a curator taking notes and making drawings of the logs from the old chapel. And in the background, we see the new chapel under construction in the traditional log timber technique. So this was the way in which documentation was taking notes, drawing, and of course, here we also have the picture, and we can see how this log looked like and the new construction. The picture up here, you can see some slides from a film, some sequences from a film. It was done in the 80s, and it starts with the same topic, building with the timber. And actually, Gunnar has a critique on this film. Why? Because it was made not in the view to transmit this knowledge. It was not following the whole process. It was done very quickly for the purpose of just filming and, in a way, raising awareness. And in his project, what they did is that they had 2 craft people, the 2 blacksmiths, that tried to reconstruct these scenes, this process, in today's life. And by doing so, they realized that something was wrong, that, you see these circles, there were some mistakes. due to the fact that it was not done in a proper way, but actually it was just filming for raising awareness, and it would be impossible today to transmit this knowledge if this film was to be followed. And the last pictures is this one. Actually, you see that visually nothing has changed, but the understanding of audiovisual documentation that did, because you see that here his judgments of sound direct his actions. What is mostly the most important thing that I learned from reading this paper, From Archive to Living Heritage, is how to integrate these judgments, this tacit knowledge that craftspeople have in our documentation. And actually, in this case, this craft person is talking about, you have to, the sound is that of a click or clack, and he's explaining what should you hear in the process of doing this craft that he's working on. So yeah, this is just a short reminder of all the documentation processes, the needs and the developments that we have to take into consideration if we want to document living heritage in a proper manner to be relevant for not only for our research, but what is more important and what is the primary role for our communities. And finally, we come to the inventories. So under the convention, the term inventories is reserved for compilations of intangible cultural heritage practiced in state parties, and it is Article 12.1, while the term list is reserved for the two international lists of the convention. The term register concerns the equally international register of good safeguarding practices. I will not go into details. I know that Hannah presented the list and the register, but this is just to understand the difference between the inventories, the list, and the register. And what does the convention say about inventories? So this one you probably already heard, that each state party shall take the necessary measures to ensure the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage present in its territory. Among the safeguarding measures referred to in Article 2, Paragraph 3, identify and define the various elements of the intangible cultural heritage present in its territory. The identification directly relates to inventorying, but here we don't see the need to build an inventory. Nevertheless, Article 12 asks the states parties to ensure identification with a view to safeguarding, and each state party with this aim shall draw up in a manner geared to its own situation one or more inventories of the intangible cultural heritage present in its territories. These inventories shall be regularly updated. You know that the convention is a very open document with not many requirements, but this is one of the requirements. This is really important. Without having an inventory which is confirmed as being representative by the states, the state party cannot participate in listing his or their own elements on the international UNESCO lists. Also, when each state party periodically submits its report to the committee in accordance with Article 29, it shall provide relevant information on such inventories. And I know that many of you, I assume many of you participated in reporting last year when all of the stakeholders were asked to, in a way, contribute to the new reporting mechanisms that were really challenging for all the state parties. Later on, I will just give a short introduction to the overall results framework. so that you can understand also the needs and the contribution that the inventories give to this reporting system and to the implementation of the convention on national level. But to continue with the purposes or the status of the inventories within the convention, I just want to briefly mention that there is also an opportunity for the state parties, and it relates to the international assistance that may be granted for the following purposes. You can now see all the purposes. The first one is for the list of intangible cultural heritage in need of urgent safeguarding. So for different projects that would help the viability, the revitalization of these kind of elements, but also for the preparation of inventories in the sense of Article 11 and 12. And I know that last year Albania took this advantage. Well, actually took the advantage 3 years ago, but they finalized the project on community-based inventorying, and you can find information also on the UNESCO sites. There are also other possibilities, and later on you will receive this presentation, I assume, and I have put also the toolkit on international assistance, which is really a very good tool if on national level there are projects that could be presented to the committee or to the secretary that could be financed through this mechanism, the international assistance, and where also different inventories on local levels could be proposed. The operational directives, and I believe Hannah explained that these are really, this is really the crucial document along with the convention and the ethical principles that in a way helps us navigate through the convention. So in the operational directives, we see that the participation of communities among other activities is needed in drawing up of inventories. And I unfortunately wasn't able to follow all the webinars, but I did. I was here with the last presentation, but by our colleague Ala, and I know there was a lot of discussion about how actually to receive the prior and informed consent, how to include them, how to in a way be sure that they actively participated. And later on, we will see some examples of drawing up inventories and maybe find some solutions and some answers to these questions. As we said, the state parties reports on the legislative, regulatory and other measures taken from implementation of the convention at the national level. So the report should include also the way of drawing up inventories present in its territories and of course in conformity with the convention. Now I have been talking a bit about the role of the state and its importance of its major role in setting up inventories in order to participate in this wider international arena of safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. But I would also like to, for a moment, talk about another role, and this is the role of the NGOs. And because their role in facilitating the communication between the state and the bearers is sometimes crucial. The Article 9 of the Convention says that the committee shall propose to the General Assembly the accreditation of non-governmental organizations which recognize the competence in the field of the intangible cultural heritage to act in an advisory capacity to the committee. Why I'm saying this? Because maybe some of you don't know this information or don't have this information, that there is a possibility for NGOs that are recognized, that have competencies in the field of safeguarding ICH to be accredited to offer advisory service to the committee. And today there are 2,217 accredited NGOs, but only 23 in Eastern Europe, which covers part of the Central Europe and our region as well. So this is just an opportunity for all of you and then information. Unfortunately, the deadline for this year has already passed, but there is a possibility, and it says here that there is a standard format, ICH09, to submit the request. You can find it online. It should be submitted in English or French, the working languages of the committee, and you will find all criteria in the operational directives, paragraph 91. Why is this important? Because through the involvement of relevant NGOs is crucial in identifying, defining, and safeguarding ICH. It really follows the suggestions of the convention, not only research centers, not only museums, which are crucial. Museums, a research center, especially in the local communities, are the institutions that act as these mediators and facilitators of for safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, but this is one specific opportunity for the NGOs. We have been talking about the need to set up the inventory. It is really important to know that the 2003 Convention, there are no single model or template for inventories, nor for identifying, nor for setting the framework for setting the actual inventory. So there is a lot of difference between countries. You have heard that there is Brazil with many different inventories. For example, we have also the case in Bosnia with different inventories. We have the national registries, but also in your case, we have the national one and the regional scope. One important thing that is emphasized within the convention is that there shouldn't be any hierarchization within these different systems. So this is really important, not to set a hierarchy between these two inventories, not saying the national one is more important, just to very clearly differ their role and the purpose of each of these inventories. Even though there are no standards, there are the 8 guiding principles for setting up an inventory. And we will now slowly go through these 8 guiding principles. But before I do so, I would just like to briefly stop and ask if there is any question until now, or any comment, or if I'm too fast in presenting. I promise that in let's say 20 more minutes, we will finish with the theoretical part, and there will be much more examples and much more interactivity with all of you. So just a brief stop. Is there any question? I cannot see the hands up. So if Chayana, maybe you can just tell me, signalize if there is any hands up and need to shortly discuss. If not, let's continue with the guiding principles. So as I said, no strict rules, but still the guiding principles that are quite clear and that can guide the national inventories, which is maybe not of your concern at this moment because they're already set. But there is always the possibility to improve also the national ones and also to improve the participation of the communities. So the first guiding principle is that it should be based on procedures that were agreed upon with the communities, groups, or appropriate individuals concerned, while their consent is required before the start of inventorying processes and for major decisions during these processes. again, I know this is difficult, but according to the definition provided in the convention, nobody can decide for the communities whether or not a given expression or practice belongs to their heritage. This is something that maybe in our past exercises and past research was unimaginable, because very often we see that people are not aware of the richness they embody. Still, if a community doesn't give the free, prior, and informed consent, first of all, there is the need to raise awareness between them and to discuss between them in order to set this first guiding principle. The second guiding principle relates to the identification, to the participation of the communities in identifying with the participation of the communities and groups concerned. And again, we see the non-governmental organization. Actually, participation relates strongly also with the community consent, but not entirely. So if we have the community consent, but maybe they don't want to be pretty much involved in drafting or in planning or in archiving, you know, like being totally active, that is fine. But we should find ways, appropriate ways, to involve the communities as much as possible. The actual depth of community involvement varies significantly from country to country, but a broad community participation should include some steps. Fully informing the communities before and during the inventorying process. So one idea could be that on a weekly or monthly basis, there is a journal that informs the communities concerned about the progress of the inventorying. Obtaining the consent concerned for each major step in the inventorying process, so not maybe for every single information, but once that you decide to include something in the register, there should be broad consulting with the community. Ensuring data collection is conducted by the community, or at least including practitioners and other community experts as equal partners in documentation teams. The minimum of involvement should be to discuss what should be documented, filmed, or photographed. And once this is done, to be presented to them if they agree with these shots, with this sequence, and so on. Taking decisions about the archiving and really, really important, accessibility to data collected. We know that this is the question of data accessibility, so this should be, especially on this local level, if you're working on a local level and building inventories, this should be discussed at the very beginning in the planning phase. How do you want this inventory to be accessible? Is it only accessible to the community concerned, and they have, for example, a password they can enter and see this archive, this inventory, or they really wish to have it online in really basic manners? It can be a Facebook group, it can be a shared Google Drive, it can be on a municipality level, on the web page of a municipality. So you can open your minds, and in discussing with the communities, really start to think about how could these inventories be accessible or not. Should aim to, so the third guiding principle is that the inventories should aim to be inclusive. And when we talk about inclusiveness, it really has different aspects. It should include diverse intangible cultural heritage. It should take into consideration minority groups, gender issues. So this all should be taken into consideration. And here in the section of inclusive inventorying, we need to always think about the representativeness of the people that are talking to us, that we are talking to. Are they representing all the community? Should we be more alert and think, okay, maybe we should include other voices as well? So this is really important in building the inclusive inventory. The fourth principle is that it should contain substantial information about the inventoried elements. Again, here we will be later on maybe having all this information listed, but just for the sake of this moment, it is really important that this inventorying process includes the name of the element and the communities concerned, the details about the present day practice and transmission of the element. This is what usually is lacking in our archival material that we have about intangible cultural heritage, even though we know that this element is still practiced. Its state of viability and, if applicable, threats and risks to that viability, and information on the capacity of the element to mitigate potential natural or human hazards. This is something new, but it could be included as a substantial information. Then information concerning when the entry was collected and processed, and the date of inclusion in the inventory and when it was most recently updated. The fifth principles should be designed in such a way that they contribute to the purposes of the convention, safeguarding in the first place. We discussed a lot about the purpose of the convention, but also of the inventorying processes. So these inventories shouldn't be just developed and put aside and not accessible to anyone. These inventories have to have a purpose. They have to help raising awareness, teaching kids, helping communities understanding what are the threats that these are facing. So whatever small achievement is done with the process of inventorying, it contributes to the purpose of the convention. The sixth guiding principles relates to the update of the inventories. And here we have a really important question about how are these inventories updated. We know that very often, again, we make the research, it is included in an archive or even in the inventories. And then each 4 or 2 years or each year, there is a new call, a new possibility for communities to send their own applications, their formularies to be included in the national list. And this is indeed a way to update the inventory, but only with new elements. And this is not enough. We need to find ways in which also the elements already included in the inventory could be updated. This can be done in different ways. One is that the editor of the inventory, so the person managing the inventory and the group of people, the researchers, pay visit to the groups and the communities at least once in 2 or 3 years in order to see what are the developments. For these purposes, it would be good to develop also a very short formula that could help you in understanding these differences and the changes that were happening in this period that you were not there. Another way could be also to provide a form for all the people that wish to do it by themselves. Not only, as I said, propose new elements, but after a period of time to ask them, hey, could you send us a report? How are you doing? What are the changes? And ask them to fill in a short survey on the status of their heritage, of their cultural heritage, and in this way to update the inventory. The seventh should be reported about in the 6 yearly periodic reports. Okay, so this is something that we already said. The obligation of the state is not only to set up an inventory, but also to periodically report about the process of inventorying, but what is more important, the methods of updating these inventories. And finally, the 8 guiding principles that this inventory should respect customary practices concerning access to intangible cultural heritage. We have been discussing that a bit before about access, so this would be the 8 guiding principles. I would propose to continue just a bit more and then make maybe a break. We see that the importance of the inventories is not only because we want to list the intangible cultural heritage and therefore we need to have the inventories in order to present it to UNESCO. We see in this slide the overall results framework. Here are the 8 thematic areas that have been that need to be reported, and for us in this case the most important part is inventorying and research, and the core indicator is to what extent inventories reflect the diversity of ICH and contribute to safeguarding. And this is really important. Why? Because we see that the convention asks for the diversity of ICH. How can inventories reflect this diversity? And here we have the assessment according to the following. What could be done to have this diversity reflected? 1 or more inventorying systems oriented towards safeguarding and reflecting the diversity of ICH have been established or revised since ratification. Specialized inventories and or inventories of various scopes reflect diversity and contribute to safeguarding. So different groups, different communities, different domains are covered. 7.3, existing inventory or inventories have been updated during the reporting period, in particular to reflect the current viability of elements included. I just explained what that means. 7.4, access to ICH inventories is facilitated while respecting customary practices governing access to specific aspects of ICH, and they are utilized to strengthen safeguarding. The question of accessibility is not only about whether one element could be accessed because of the customary practices. It is also related to the digital literacy of our communities. Are they prepared? Do they have the competencies to navigate our inventories? This is really a crucial point, because when we come from our perspective, we want to build inventories that are really rich in content, have different media, have all the different information inside. But to make an ICH inventory accessible, it should be accessible both from the start, so that they can propose what to be included in the inventories in a very clear and easy way, and then to be able to access this information again in a very clear, easy manner. This is a really big challenge that we all have to have in mind. I will continue with the specialized inventories of various scopes reflect diversity. I use the 7.2 indicator as a title to once again show how the diversity can be covered. So we can have different concepts of inventories, different formats, different content. So if we have a inventory with just text and photographs, it will be totally different from a multimedia inventory. Then if we have all domains covered or one specific domain, or if we do it for educational purposes, or if we build an inventory within the museum that actually gives context to our museum objects, Or, for example, as I said, that I will explain a bit further, I did a exercise, let's say like that. It wasn't actually an inventory, but it was an inventorying process that had to lead very small communities in identifying different aspects that they would like to present as a tourist offer within their own community. So the inventorying process had a question, had a reflection included in this questionnaire that really targeted the scope of this inventory, because not everything could be used in a positive way, of course, for the sake of the tourist offer of this region. So this had to be taken into consideration, and that's why the purpose guided also the inventorying process. We can see here, and I really urge you to Google map of e-inventories globally, enable direct access to 170 inventories. I don't know if you knew about it, but it is a very nice way to show the diversity of the inventories that are present in our region, but in other regions as well. We see that Western Europe, of course, as in other aspects of the convention, is leading the way, but I think that also our region is really doing a great job with the green dots, and that you can all contribute with your own inventories to this shared map of global intangible cultural heritage. Why I'm talking that much about this diversity? Actually, as I said, the aim of this webinar was not to talk about the national inventory. You already have one system in place, but just to talk about inventories as tools for your everyday life, for your everyday professional life. How can you use this tool to improve the ways you work with safeguarding intangible cultural heritage? Okay, so there are different levels of working on a geographical scope. The international level, as we have seen, you can look at all these lists, and you can see and you can get inspired by these different inventories. But the most important relation between national inventories and the UNESCO list is that the fifth criterion for inscription on both lists of the convention states that the elements nominated for inscription must figure in an inventory drawn up in conformity with Articles 11 and 12 of the convention. These are criterion U5 for the urgent safeguarding list and R5 for the representative list. In order to meet these criteria, state parties must fill in the boxes in section 5, and many of you that worked on that process know how it goes. The most difficult part in this section is not only to show that you have an inventory set in place, but that it is regularly updated. This is the most challenging part. And here we see, this is an extraction that you can see here of the two lists, if I may call it so, inventories, the treasures, the living human treasures, and the intangible cultural heritage of Bulgaria for the, for the inscription, the last inscription in 2001. And what is important here, what I wanted to emphasize, is that whoever is involved in preparing the inventories, so I'm now asking you, you have to work with your communities and please build inventories. They can help really in educational systems, in tourism development, in museum development, and so on. Still, whoever takes the initiative to inventory intangible cultural heritage, it is ultimately the prerogative and responsibility of state parties to the convention to recognize one or more inventories as official inventories of the intangible cultural heritage present within their borders. Inventorying under the convention is inevitably both a top-down and a bottom-up process, and state parties need to find a balance between both approaches. And I think this is a very nice experience that Bulgaria has with two different but combined inventories and with this workshop really contributing to the development of diverse inventories on local level. Once again, just to have a short break, I will show you a film that I hope can inspire your future work and show you how the inventories don't need to be, you know, very huge or static, or have this old idea of having an inventorying list with only text and the photo, but they can be really dynamic and can be built upon different concepts. And one example, and I'm not sure if this will work, but let's try, is the dive into ICH. Maybe I have to stop sharing. Okay, I'm sorry, just a second. Share screen. Oh, where is it? Where is it? So sorry, just a second. I'm not sure why I can't do this. Just a second.
Tangible cultural heritage takes infinite form.
Okay, I will.
Yes. It is a source of human creativity and cultural diversity. Living heritage brings human beings and communities closer together. The 2003 Convention aims at safeguarding this heritage and ensuring its continuous transmission. In 10 years, UNESCO listed almost 500 intangible cultural heritage elements. But how do we grasp the diversity of these elements? How are the cultural practices of communities across more than 100 countries connected? UNESCO mapped them all against 1,000 concepts and invites you to dive into intangible cultural heritage. How does living heritage relate to nature? And what about you? What about your heritage? Keep it lively and pass it on.
Okay, so sorry, I'm not really good with this, with all the technologies, with all the. sorry. With all the windows opened on my computer, but hopefully you understood the point of the dive into ICH. This is really, and I urge you to visit the page of unescoich.org, and you will find Dive into ICH. This is just a small video that shows you the way how it works. But actually you can explore all the diverse inventories, I would say, the entries that relate to, for example, craftsmanship, and then you can see all the different crafts, then all the different elements relating to nature. So it is really an innovative way of thinking about inventories and the relation between intangible cultural heritage elements. So actually this way of inventorying, if we may call it like that, helps actually to build dialogue on a global level. Okay, so let me resume my presentation. Okay, here it is. So to develop new inventories, we need to understand it is a constant work in progress. And again, I'm telling you about this need to update. Actually, this is the most important part, that we understand and we communicate to our communities that intangible cultural heritage is a living heritage. It changes. It always reflects in a way the challenges, the political, the environmental, the health issues that we had with the COVID. And we will have later on a Bosnian example of what they did during the pandemics and how the ICH reflected and how it changed and how it adapted to the challenges. And all of this was included in the reflection of an inventory. So drawing up inventories have typically 4 main stages. Planning, and there are a lot of questions. And if we will have time, we will go through all these questions that you can take into consideration while planning. If not, I will send to you all these materials. Then gathering information, as we said, documentation, which is, as I'm a visual anthropologist as well, and I worked with this within the context of the film festival, this is something I'm really interested in this participatory documentation. Systematizing, analyzing, and archiving the information collected, because sometimes it will be impossible because of some space, and when I say space, I mean physical and digital space. It will be impossible to archive all the materials that we may be collected, or we will need to build different systems of archiving to have all the films and all the photographs collected, and what is important, systematized in a good manner. The 4th step is drafting and publishing inventory entries. And here is our main task for today. What, after all this gathered information, should be presented and published to be accessible to a diverse public? They cannot see all the raw materials that we have. So it is, in a way, curating the materials collected with the view to safeguard intangible cultural heritage. What are the informations that we want to present? This is an important step in actually inventorying and building inventories. So in developing new inventories, we also have different criteria. So as we said, the state parties are free to develop criteria for the inclusion of elements in their inventories. The criteria should be clear, in line with the spirit of the convention, and not large in number. So it is not important to list as much as possible, but with the view to safeguard and with the view to include people, to communicate with them, and to have this as a joint effort. One of the criteria is that the compliance with the definition of intangible cultural heritage, We all know Article 2, and it is frequently referenced, but always and ever again, we need to remind ourselves, because it is in our culture, it is in our minds that all the practices that are maybe even no longer practiced or vital today, of course, should be safeguarded. But in the concept of the convention, in the context, in the context of the convention, we really need to pay attention that the communities are informed, that they agree, that the intangible cultural heritage is practiced. We need to pay attention that it changes over time, and we need to explicitly formulate that and make reference to it. So all of these things that are in a way new, even though this year we are celebrating 20 years of the convention, still many of these requirements are new and difficult to implement. The second criteria, compliance with the spirit of the convention. Again, the spirit of the Universal Declaration on Cultural Diversity, the fundamental equality of cultures as an overarching principle. So here we really reflect the human rights, but also the equality of culture and not hierarchy between different cultural elements. So these inventories, whether the national one or the local ones, should have these overarching principles of the equality of cultures. Transmitted from generation to generation, this is something, again, not specified within the convention, but I know that in your system it is 50 years, if I'm not mistaken. So this is a way maybe to see how to show this generation and how to prove that it was transmitted from years. When we work with existing inventories, it is really difficult sometimes to adopt these inventories to the new needs. These inventories are equally valuable, and of course they should remain and they should coexist with maybe the new ones that are maybe more inclusive and work more with the communities. But the old one, the existing ones, are also the source of information that we need. For example, I was browsing through through your inventory, the treasures of Bulgaria, and finding all these archival photos that are really, show the continuity of some elements. So the existing inventories and the ones that maybe you will be inspired to create after this session on local level can really bring these two together. States may choose to bring, as I said, existing inventories into conformity with Article 11 or 12, meaning that they decide to use one old inventory and adapt it with the objectives, align them with the objectives of the convention. And they can do so by updating them in intensive collaboration with the communities concerned. Even though it sounds a good idea and it sounds like something easy to do, there are at least two challenges. The community no longer wishes to safeguard this element. We included it in the 80s, and today maybe there are 3 or 4 people who still know how to do this craft or things like that, and they're really not interested because they cannot make a livelihood out of it. Or there is the impossibility to receive free, prior, and informed consent, because some of the people that gave information to our colleagues, ethnologists, that included this information in the inventory are no longer with us. So there is a lot of challenges, and sometimes it is easier to make a new inventory, but always having inspiration and deriving information from the existing one, and having them working together for the sake of preservation, archiving, and safeguarding in terms of accessibility, in terms of awareness raising, and working on everyday life with intangible cultural heritage. Part 2, and we go with the practical examples. I would now like to stop. It's been more than an hour of me talking. So I would like to, first of all, stop for a minute, ask you if you have any comments or questions, and I will just stop sharing so I can see you. Okay, so I now see the chat. I'm sorry, but I see Shayana is helping me out. Is there any comment or any question that you would like to ask?
Hello.
Yes, please.
Mirena Turova from Bulgarian Academy of Science, the Institute of Knowledge for Technology.
Yes.
I also work on projects for sorry. Are you hearing?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I also work at the same time for exactly projects for digitalizing cultural heritage and others, and accessibility. And I can see in the field there is different understanding about it and different, how to say, priorities. So I can ask if you have, maybe in the examples you will share with us, you can have advice how to resolve if the different parties have different priorities on the matter. Like some of them want more quality recordings and files and more detailed description, and some of them want more simple. Some of them want only experts involved, but as you said, community is important to be in it. Of course, that might mean mistakes can happen. So if you have some advice on how to communicate this to reach a better result. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirena, for your question. Actually, probably as well as you, I'm sorry for my dog, Mir. As well as you, I have had very different situations. And actually, at the very moment, I'm working with some international colleagues on preparing a toolkit on documenting through audiovisual formats. When we talk about documentation, very often we talk about films, because this is like the most common way of documenting today. And as we said, it is more comprehensive when we talk about living heritage. But we shouldn't forget all the notes and the photos that we can also use in these processes. Now, coming to this prioritization, it really depends on the organization and the purpose of documenting. As I said, if your organization wishes to work with UNESCO, we are talking now about intangible cultural heritage as promoted by the 2003 convention, and we need to follow these rules, let's say, or suggestions that really focus on the communities. What do communities want? If these communities really want to do a film of them, I don't know, cutting a tree from beginning till the end, this whole raw material should be available somewhere. But if they want to do it for the sake of teaching kids at school, in local schools, what is their local cultural heritage, and they want to teach them, for example, a dance, probably you will have a shorter video that would be accessible online. So it really depends on the purpose of your of the project or of the institution. What should be done? What would I recommend? And I think this is something that you at the level of academy can do, is to always archive the raw material. So to have these lengthy materials, the whole research with audio recordings and audiovisual recordings, and with the metadata archived. But for the purpose of the inventory, just to make a short edit of, for example, 5 to 10, 20 minutes, so that people can really see what this heritage is all about. And this edited version can be, for example, done in communication and in really intense collaboration with representatives of this community. I hope this helped a bit your question.
Thank you.
Any other question or maybe comments or your experiences in working with building inventories? Is there anyone who had some kind of experience in building local inventories for different purposes. No. Okay. Chayana, do you want us to make a 5-minute break, or do we continue?
We could make the break.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's make it 5 minutes, and we are back with some examples and some joint efforts in building our own inventories. See you in 5 minutes. Welcome back. Hope it is fine that we restart. Okay. Maybe you had the time to think if you wish to add something, or you want me to continue. So if you want, just stop me and say. Okay. Sorry, once again. Okay, so we are now in the part of the inventories and some practical examples. I want to warn you that some of these examples are not really what you would think as an inventory. But if we go back to the very beginning of the presentation, and we understand that the convention actually asks us to build how to say, lists of the intangible cultural heritage present in our own territories with the participation of communities, you will see that actually inventories can take very different forms. And I would like to share some of these. And not only because these are good or bad ones, but just to show you the diversity of possibilities. I will start with a very, very good one. And this is the intangible search. It was done by the Lombardy region, who activated practically a law based on the law from 2008, a process of identification, preservation, and enhancement of intangible cultural heritage. And sorry, here for preservation, it is just a matter of translation. It should be stated safeguarding through specific projects that promote the recognition, dissemination, and transmission. The online inventory that we are going to see now is accessible and disseminates knowledge of the living heritage, which are manifested through, and now they have all the domains. And actually it was conducted, it was established through a cooperation project between the 6 Swiss-Italian ethnography for the enhancement of the intangible heritage. So a Italy-Switzerland program, trans-border program, that actually allowed them to make the research and establish this inventory. I will now show you, it is much easier to go online and to just navigate through this inventory. Hopefully, again, I will manage. So it is called Intangible Search. And this is how it looks like. It is in 4 languages: Italian, English, French, and German, because actually its geographical scope relates to the Alpine traditions. Okay, so they have all the different, I'll put it in English, the different categories, which are actually the domains: arts and entertainment, oral tradition, rituals, naturalistic knowledge, technical knowledge, and they have also all the areas in terms of geographical locations. You can see where it is, and then you can browse the list. What is important here for me to somehow evidence, so this is how it looks like. It is really very much oriented toward craftsmanship, food tradition, farming, knowledge about nature, so everything that in our mind really reflects the Alpine way of living, but also music and different festivities. So you can browse by title, by area, and by category. And if we open one of these, for example, the art of puppetry, okay, let's see rituals. I just wanted to show you how it looks like. We can see different pictures. We have short text stating what is describing the element, the historical notes, and some information about transmission. So we see it is really concise, but actually it is really accessible. And we can see the different pictures. So this happens with all of the elements, but what I wanted to show you, which I found really, really important for our lecture, is this button here, community. So actually, how is this inventory built? At the first, it was an endeavor of participatory research of ethnologists, both from the Switzerland and from Swiss and from the Italian side. But now it really continues, but it also gives the opportunity to communities to tell us about a property in an inventory. So if they know something about an element that is already in the inventory, they can suggest something new to add to these entries, or they can suggest a new element to be inscribed. And it is really easy. It asks your name. It asks your email. Just to show you, because if I don't do it, it won't go further. The element title, tell us about it here. So no strict rules. Tell us what you want us to know about your element. Of course, they have examples in the inventory, so many people will just look at the examples and do the same thing here. Finally, you can upload photos. Then the next one, you can add something that is not really concerning the description of the element, but maybe some emotions that you have or some memories connected with this. And then finally, you accept the terms and loading the publication, the conditions of the publication. So a very easy approach to include and enhance participation of local communities. So this was the good example that I wanted to show you. And the second one is let me see, it will be easier like this. So this is the intangible search that we just saw. Then we have the history and traditional instruments online. And I will now show you how it looks like. Can you see the museum, the objects now displayed? No. Now?
Yes.
Yes, we see.
Okay, so this is an example which is not maybe the most perfect one in terms of participation, in terms of working with communities. Of course, it is done by some of my colleagues, and they really did extensive research. And the aim of this inventory, if we may call it so, was to connect in a way the material, the tangible cultural heritage with the intangible cultural heritage. And you have audio, video, and photo material connected. So the audio tracks that show you that help you understand how each of these instruments sounds. It states the author of the people who play the instrument, and what is really important, the makers of the instruments. So we can see this more as an archive of intangible cultural heritage, but also, as a basis to build inventories that would connect local communities everyday players, everyday community, today's communities with their musical heritage. But this is a very nice example. How can, if we continue working on this and include more local communities in it, it is really a nice way to show how can tangible and intangible cultural heritage work together, and how can actually the concepts of the convention and of the inventorying processes enrich our museum collections. I have been talking about the experiences of Bosnia, and actually it was so this is the third example I wish to show you, and actually it was funded by UNESCO during the COVID pandemic. And what they did is to digitize different, mostly performing arts within different regions of Bosnia and Herzegovina. And you can see here Derventa, for example, sviranje na šargi, playing on šargija. So what are the information they included? And it was done by sending a questionnaire to different communities. Usually it is someone from the cultural sector working in this community that would fill in this questionnaire. And this is our great challenge, how to go a step forward and really ask the communities to fill in this information or to decide what to be included there. But this is also a very nice way of raising awareness and using the inventories for sharing knowledge about local intangible cultural heritage. So you see the name of the element, the type, the local community, and what is mostly important, different time throughout the year when they practice this element, the age of the people who participate, microlocation, and then the description of this element. So these are the things that were important for this community to represent in this project. And what is most important, it is the linkage between this information and the materials available from YouTube. So you can actually not only see the pictures, but also hear and see how the movements are made. So this is really important in documenting and building these inventories. The fourth example relates to a virtual museum that I was working on, and it relates to maritime heritage. It is a joint project between Croatia and Slovenia. Hopefully it will work. So the idea was actually to promote different maritime heritage. And why I'm presenting this one, because intangible cultural heritage was just one part of this bigger family of heritage, different heritage. And it was really challenging, as our colleague just said, Mirena, I think. Sometimes it's really difficult to, when you work in a bigger organization or on bigger projects, to really have all the same ideas that will drive your end project. And here it was really difficult for me to make our colleagues who work within the tangible sector or who are maritime specialists but are not heritage specialists to make a distinction of what would be intangible cultural heritage, or to make them understand that actually all of these elements that they wanted to present as, for example, different events follow also under the category of intangible cultural heritage. But for the purpose of this presentation, I will show you what we did. So this is the boat Batana. It is a traditional boat of my hometown in Rovinj in Croatia. And we made a very short film. This was the requirement of the project, to have it 5 minutes just for presentational purposes. Unfortunately, due to internet, I think it won't play. but just you see some sequences, how it was made. Okay, so this virtual museum was later on updated through another project, and here we come to the idea of updating. And actually, in the second project, what we did, we really improved this one, because here you can see just the video, the name of the element, the state, and the classification within this database, but no other information. Of course, you can learn something through the video, but this is not enough. In the second project, we developed a very refined, category-based, with all the different possibilities and classifications of maritime heritage. I will not go into details, but just to show you how intangible cultural heritage can be also part of some bigger projects that you're doing on heritage, on specific heritage within your local communities. And finally, let me see. There is another example that I wanted to show. Can you see my presentation now? No, probably. And this last project that I want to present to you is really something, I think, very innovative, but it is somehow far away from our idea of an inventory, but I think it is a really good tool for community participation. So here, just one more slide, so you can see how actually this virtual museum looks like. So you have different categories and also traditional activities as one of the many. Here, the Derventa project. And finally, Crafting the Sea. This is a project that I'm really very proud of. It was, but it still, of course, is a 15-month multidisciplinary project aimed at identifying local knowledge for monitoring climate change, identifying biodiversity, mitigating risk, and promoting a more balanced relationship between humans and nature. These are my co-citizens, fishermen, that are also part of members of our NGO that manages this eco-museum I work for. And this project was supported by UNESCO Venice office. And actually what you see here is the screen of an application that you can find on Google Play, and hopefully soon on for iOS as well, on Apple. And actually this application very shortly introduces you to the idea of intangible cultural heritage and its connection with local environment, in our case the sea, because our small boat that you saw in the other video it was really operating. It was a fishery. It is still a fishing boat for shallow waters. It is used for traditional techniques, for small fishing. And really, when I was thinking about the name of this project, Crafting was the name that I wanted to use, because actually through this handmade approach to nature, and which is reflected in intangible cultural heritage, we can sustain our environment. This application offers the opportunity for different users to detect some species they find on the shore, and they can add their own knowledge connected, or some practices that they know how they prepared this food maybe, or when this fish was catched. So different knowledge they connect with this species and some parts of the shore. So as I said, it's not a typical inventory, but it was a way to engage people and to share their knowledge connected with the sea. And now we are slowly building this database, which can become also an inventory. I stop here with the examples. I ask you to please, if you have any comments or questions on some specific aspects of these projects, you're welcome. No questions or comments? No. Okay, so for the last 20 minutes that we have, or 15, I will ask you not to talk, but to write. So I will now share in the chat a link to a Google form. It is really brief, but I would like to have your opinion or your ideas. If you could imagine like the best inventory that you would like to work on and produce, how would it look like? So just a second, I will now share the link in the chat, and you will have 15 minutes or 10 minutes. Let's see how much time you need. Just a second. Okay, here it is. So if you click to this link, you will come to a Google form. It is totally anonymous, so you can write whatever you can, whatever you want, but it is really to unleash your imagination and build the best inventory that you could imagine. This small exercise is here just to help us understand your ideas and the possibilities maybe to develop future projects within the region. So I really ask you to kindly fill in this questionnaire. Thank you very much.
Аз само искам да използвам момента да кажа, че в чата съм пуснала линк към всичките тези примери, които Тамара ни даваш време на тяхната презентация, така че после може да стигнете и след презентацията се вдъхновите. Ще ви помоля, ако имате въпроси, да ги зададете в чата. Задачите ще помагат при аз. Самото упражнение може да бъде на български и ние ще помогнем.
Cheyenne, I forgot to say that I Google translated the question, so I'm sorry if something is wrong, but I did it a bit last minute. I was preparing another exercise, so hopefully the Google Translate is okay within the format, within the formular. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for your participation. Until now, we have 25, I think, answers, 24, which is really great. And many of you really shared and then took the time to write how they feel they could include the communities and individuals concerned in the process of building an inventory. I would like to take a few more minutes just to show you the results of this small exercise. And of course, still open the floor for your questions. Okay, can you see the Google form? So we see there is a diversity within the geographical scope of your imaginative or your realistic inventories. So 32% of local, 30 now, regional 26, national 23, but also 19% from global or international inventories, which is really great. And I really like how it is somehow each of the geographical scope has its own public. The main content would be festivities and rituals. You're mostly oriented towards this type of intangible cultural heritage, but also all domains, then craftsmanship, I'm really happy to see also traditional games and food heritage, because this is something that is also emerging, but also, as said, oral tradition, including language. Here on what kind of media would you include, I think I gave different options. So probably many of you had had more options selected, but we see that also here we have a diversity of thinking about what should be there, because as we discussed, very extended descriptive text maybe won't be the best for a specific audience. On the other side, exactly the extended descriptive text and the diverse multimedia will enrich the inventory. So most of you would like to have this descriptive text and diverse multimedia, but also, which is really important, archival material, audio, and photo. So here it is really about balancing and knowing your audience and their needs, what they can and they wish to in a way, consume as content. There is a lot of answers, and I really thank you. I will translate all of this. But for example, I was reading, and someone said that it is really good to organize meetings. So I also see that in my practice, whenever we were mapping something or trying to build up the Malabarka inventory, it was through meetings that we decided. Of course, later on, I would draft the text and I would then present it to them, but it is jointly that we came to some decision what should be presented and how, in what manner. So these meetings are really important, but also someone wrote, I would ask them what is the best way to present their skills and living heritage in order to safeguard it and make it socialized, so everybody could benefit from it. Also, we have a specific example from Marčenica donations, which already have a developed way of working. So thank you very much for this, and we will definitely share a report with all of you on different ways of including communities concerned. I think that each one of you can inspire one another. And finally, the main purpose of your inventory, and I'm again also very happy to see the diversity, even though most of you think about identification and awareness raising, which definitely is one of the first things that comes to mind when we think about inventories, we see a nice percentage of mapping for developing tourism and other development projects, research, providing teaching materials, and developing context for museum objects, which is really, really great. So thank you for your time and dedication to follow also this webinar and to take the time to write. All the ones that didn't do it, you can maybe have this link and continue writing your answers. I will now open the floor for the last comments, if there are any. If not,
Тамара,
yes.
някакво микрофон получава, не знам дали това ще опиша.
There is a feedback, and indeed the interpreters can hear the feedback.
Okay, biste li dali primjer od Hrvatska, to za obrazovatelj praktikum?
Do you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Is the question in the chat?
Yes, there are comments question. The one is from Dimitri Nanaidova, who completed the question here and gave about ritual related harvest of community. Yes, this is some kind of what
I don't hear you. I'm so sorry. It stops.
I don't know what. Sorry.
Maybe it's mine. Okay, so I see the webinar chat. Someone has problems with the materials, opening the materials. So this is the first one. Is it? Now?
Can I join?
Yes, please. Thank you.
If you hear me well, I can read what it says in the chat.
Yes, please.
So the first one is I noted that on the last just when you're analyzing information, have in mind that the last question more than one answer can be given. But it was giving on the one. I don't know, maybe some purpose like that, just nothing. And the second one is can you please give more examples of Croatia, educational practices in schools, and safeguarding intangible cultural heritage, games and others.
Yeah,
that is I don't see the whole name. Shiva.
Yes. Denisa. Yes, thank you. So there was one question that had many different answers. So I hope it worked. If not, still it is fine. It is just an exercise to see the diversity of the approaches. And related to the to educational materials. Actually, I worked on a European level. In 2018, I was commissioned to draft the materials with my colleague Vanessa Achilles, and you can find these guidelines on UNESCO. It is a step-by-step approach how to integrate intangible cultural heritage into schools. The main idea is not to go to schools and teach about intangible cultural heritage, but to use one intangible cultural heritage as an example for some kind of teaching. For example, in Cyprus, we work with different schools in different countries. And you can find also the videos online. Maybe, Chayana, you can find the link, Teaching with Living Heritage, and put it in the chat. So, for example, in Cyprus, they worked with traditional embroidery, which is geometrical forms. And they worked in mathematics to learn how to measure these forms. So it was usual classical mathematics, but they used traditional embroidery. So in this way, they wanted to give context, local context, to build pride, but also in the same way, in the same time, to teach mathematics. This idea was developed because very often we hear teachers saying they don't have the time to add more class about intangible cultural heritage. In this way, it was integrated. For example, in Rovinj, in my hometown, again, mathematics, it was related to measuring the size of the sail, because it is a trapezoid, okay? So again, they came to the museum, they took some time to learn and explore our intangible cultural heritage, but at school, they worked in mathematics. So the whole material that was developed in this project is, you can find online. Chayana put it in the chat, and hopefully it can be of help and inspiration also for your work. Okay, any other question, please?
Благодаря ви. Беше от мен зададен. Дали чувате превода? Бих искала да ви кажа, че
I would like to thank you.
правят семинарно.
Unfortunately, there's too much feedback. Okay, so I'm not sure if I understood well. I heard there is too much feedback. Yes, okay. So you would like to discuss more? Is it too much information, or what is I'm not sure if I understood well. We cannot hear well. Aha, okay. Maybe it's a question of sound. Okay. I'm sorry, but hopefully with the presentation, And the recording of this meeting, you will be able to, yeah, but you can write also in the chat, please. And also I will put my email in the chat box, so please don't hesitate to contact me. Also for different projects that we can work on, or just to discuss some questions that you want to address. Thank you very much. Yes, they can write on my email. Chayana, I leave it to you to end the session. I really, really thank you, and I'm really grateful for this opportunity. Hopefully we will meet again somewhere.